Hi, I'm Oliver Williams. I teach at the University of Notre Dame in the area of business ethics. My appointment is in the College of Business, the Mendoza College of Business at Notre Dame. Interesting background, I studied chemical engineering at Notre Dame. That's my first degree. Then I was a U.S. naval officer and worked with the first division, it was called, a lot of young men who, in fact, didn't graduate from high school and were from poor, disadvantaged families. And the captain said, "You're going to be the Catholic lay leader." I said, "No, I'm a chem engineer. I know nothing about these things." And but I was, and I learned really the challenge and the thrill of being involved in ministry. Decided to study for the seminary education. So I studied for the priesthood at Notre Dame and did a master's in theology there. Then I went for a PhD in theology and ethics at Vanderbilt University, and then postdoctoral work at Stanford Business School. My father used to say, "Are you ever going to go to work?" And I'm not sure he thought I did, but in any event, that's where I am.
And what brought you to the field of business ethics?
That's very interesting. When I started at the University of Notre Dame, my first appointment was in the theology department in the College of Arts and Letters. And the dean called me in and she said, "You showed some interest in business." When I was in school, I worked in summers on Wall Street as a messenger boy. I mean, and there weren't many messages, so I read a lot. And was very impressed that the real power to change the world was probably not in government's hands, it was in business hands. And so I was very interested in getting business more aligned with making the world a better place. And so I team taught a course on business and theology, and then the dean of business school said, if you really want to get tenure, you should come to the College of Business because we want to start ethics. And so I did, and got tenure, and that was back in the 80s. I've been there ever since.
And when you began, what did you hope to accomplish? What were your sort of ideal goals?
My goals in teaching business ethics was to help young men and women who would be our future business leaders, and fortunately we have a lot of those at Notre Dame, to help them see that the power of business was not simply to make good products and services, but it was to change the world. They had the power to help the disadvantaged people through their policies and practices. They had the power to help growing countries in the world that didn't have a good income and good governments.
And how do you think that's worked out?
That's a good question. How has it worked out? How much has business changed the world? To a large extent, I think it has worked out. Business is doing much more today than they were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, in the way of making the world a better place. I think business sees they have tremendous power, and they're trying to use that power not only to produce goods and services, but to, in fact, make the world a better place. So, as we'll see, I am on the board member of the United Nations Global Compact, where we have 10,000 companies working toward this end. And so I'm pleased that to some extent it's worked out.
So tell us about the UN Global Compact. Explain to people who don't know what it is, what its goals are.
The UN Global Compact was formed in the year 2000 by Kofi Annan, who was then Secretary General of the United Nations. And Kofi Annan was very insightful, and his point was, look, globalization has massively increased wealth in the world. The problem is it's disproportionately increased that wealth. The rich are getting richer. In many cases, the poor are getting poorer and losing stability, losing their job security. And so we need to have companies voluntarily take on some responsibility for human rights. And so that's what he formed that Global Compact with that mission in mind back in the year 2000. We had 24 companies when we launched it in 2000. Today we have 10,000 companies in 160 countries. So it's made great advance.
And you have non-government organizations belong as well?
Yes, there are, as I mentioned, there are 10,000 businesses in the UN Global Compact, and there are 2,500 non-government organizations, including a lot of the NGOs that have traditionally been very hostile to business. We encourage them to join because now they can dialogue with business without having the press there. So people aren't simply making points to get press attention. They're really trying to help solve problems. And they do it in the quiet of the study, in the quiet of our rooms in the United Nations, rather than in the glare of the press.
And are there some universities who are members?
Well, there are a few universities who are members of the UN Global Compact, but we suggest that they join a unit that we formed 4 years after the founding of the Global Compact in 2004, which is called the Principles for Management Education. And that was formed because business leaders came to us and said, we're hiring the best and the brightest from business schools, but they know nothing about human rights. They know nothing about labor issues or environmental issues. That ought to be integrated into business curriculum. And so we formed the Principles for Responsible Management Education for business schools. And I'm happy to say we have over 900 business schools throughout the world who are members, including, of course, Notre Dame. My dean at Notre Dame was one of the founders of the Principles for Responsible Management Education, Carolyn Wu, who's now, of course, retired.
Yeah, great. So tell me what your goals and expectations are for the future. How do you see this? How do you see this going, this whole movement going on? Is it going to, is it positive or negative or how?
Well, I think what we see today is the growing power of business. Look at the annual budgets of IBM or General Electric or Microsoft. It's probably greater than 95% of the nation states of the world. And where there's money, there's power. I know they don't like to keep saying that, but it's true. And so business has to take some responsibility for the problems in the world, especially in growing countries where they don't have a sound economy. And so I think we're seeing a growing realization that business has a much broader role in society than simply making money. And business has to take into account all of its stakeholders, and particularly environmental issues, and especially in growing countries.
Do you think that there's a danger there for what I would call neo-colonialism?
As business takes on more responsibility for some of the problems in the world, the smart businesses are very clear. We don't want to be government. We want to basically be business, that is, produce goods and services. But what we've come to understand is that we need a stable environment to sell our products, to market our products. And if you're in Paris or New York or London, you don't have to worry about a stable environment. The government takes care of that. In half the world, the government doesn't take care of that the stability in the environment. So business has to help that stability. So business has to contribute in many cases to solving health issues and solving education issues. And I think they're very aware, though, they don't want to be government. A lot of the smart companies have taken some resources and said, we're going to try to educate business leaders. And we're going to try to educate government leaders so that they are better at using their resources and so that business doesn't take the place of government. And so I think, so far, I think we've been relatively successful.
Great. Now, thinking about how do you see your research as working, as creating contributions to business? What has been your research focus?
My own research focus has been to try to help business understand that the purpose of business is not simply to make money, but to create sustainable value for stakeholders. And of course, one of the stakeholders is the investor. If you don't make money, you're not here tomorrow. So never let it be said that a Catholic priest told you you didn't have to make money. But on the other hand, I think, and I've tried to encourage businesses in my writing and research, to see that they have to take some responsibility for the wider problems in society. And the purpose of business is much broader than we used to understand it to be. The notion that Milton Friedman put forward that's so prominent, the only social responsibility of business is to make money, is, I think, passé. I've tried to write and research on the issue of why should business take on these wider responsibilities? And do they have a moral obligation to take on some of the problems in the wider society? And I think they do. Now, they can't take all the problems of society, but they can. Because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something.
So, looking back, and then we'll look forward, what do you think are your biggest contributions to business ethics and to the field and to Notre Dame, of course, as well?
As I look over my trajectory in business ethics, I think the major contribution, the one that I'm most proud of, is helping the UN Global Compact. The Global Compact, as I mentioned, was announced in the year 2000. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal, and Kofi Annan was talking about forming this new organization of business which would try to advance human rights in developing countries. I wrote Kofi Annan a note. I knew nobody in the United Nations, but I said, the academic community certainly is going to support you. And then a throwaway line, if I can do anything to help you, let me know. I get a phone call from Kofi Annan's office saying, you can help us. We're having a hard time getting US companies to join. European companies are joining, Japanese companies are joining, even Chinese companies are joining. US companies are a little shy of the United Nations for a whole host of reasons. You may remember there's a lot of corruption issues back in the year 2000. Anyway, we had a series of meetings at Notre Dame, bringing CEOs together from the United States. The United Nations sent their top people and told them what they were trying to do. To make a long story short, we have over 150 major corporations in the United States now joining. And so when they formed a board of directors of the UN Global Compact Foundation, there are 4 of us, they asked me to join that. And through that, I've been able to help, I think, set the policy and the broad level and monitor the finances. And one of the biggest things I think I've helped is the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we are saying is the ethical obligation of business is not simply to do no harm, but it's also, justice it certainly includes do no harm, but justice is giving each person his or her due. And it seems to me the Sustainable Development Goals are a series of 17 goals which are trying to overcome world poverty. And the United Nations put them forward in the year 2000, not simply for governments, but for business. In fact, business is doing most of the work on the Sustainable Development Goals. So I feel I've had some role in advancing those Sustainable Development Goals and giving the United Nations Global Compact a broader role, not simply telling business don't do any harm, but in fact try to do some good.
And tell us, because there are 2 sets of Sustainable Development Goals. The one in 2000 that did a lot by 2015, and now the new one.
Yeah.
2030. So I don't think, not everybody knows that.
Yeah, I think, let's be clear. First, we had the Millennium Development Goals. And that was a series of 6 goals, which were basically trying to help people in developing countries. Things like advance gender equity, advance education of children, overcome hunger, basically to overcome world poverty. And then they were up in the year 2015, and the United Nations said, let's get a wider array of goals and call them the Sustainable Development Goals and target 2030 as the time when we would achieve those goals. And so the UN Global Compact has taken on that challenge, and we're trying to advance those 17 goals. And they're a little wider than the Millennium Development Goals. They talk about things like water and climate action, and trying to bring electricity to the billion people in the world who don't have it, And they also include the similar issues that were in the Millennium Development Goals, like overcoming world hunger and advancing gender equity, education for children.
And you also might back up and talk about, because by 2015, poverty, abject poverty had been reduced by what? A half, I think.
Yes.
Right, or a third or a half?
I don't know.
Significant. Significant, all right.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that the Millennium Development Goals, which were terminated in 2015, made significant advances in overcoming world poverty, in education for children, and in overcoming world hunger. Didn't solve those problems, but made a lot of significant advances, and we felt very encouraged.
What do you think the big questions are that we in business ethics need to address today, and I would say in the future, the near future?
As I look over the landscape for the future, I think one of the major issues that business ethics has to address is privacy. I think given the technological advances, what we commonly understood as privacy is no longer going to be available without many changes in our behavior and the way we use technology. A lot of work needs to be done to protect and promote our privacy, and I think some people are making some headway on that, but we have a long way to go.
So, this is sort of changing the subject a little bit. Some people argue that business ethics is a profession. Do you see that as and of course that leads us to the question, is management a profession? What are your views on that?
I am quite convinced that business ethics is a profession. If you look at the purpose of business as making money, and a lot of people still do. I mean, next time you're at a cocktail party, ask people, what's the purpose of business? They're going to say, make money. And this is unfortunately, most people think. But I think those of us teaching business ethics have long decided that the purpose of business is to create sustainable value for stakeholders. And it has a much broader purpose than making money. And your stakeholders certainly include your employees, and the physical environment includes your suppliers. It certainly includes the customers and, of course, the investors. And I think that is clearly a profession. And, this idea of making money has put us way off base in business. I mean, you ask a medical doctor, what's the purpose of being a medical doctor? She's going to tell you to heal patients. She has to make money or she's not here tomorrow. But that's not her purpose. And she's a profession with a code of conduct, with a set of ethics, a set of principles that guide her behavior. And so it's not self-interest so much as the interest of the wider community. I think business leaders are the same way. Similarly, if you ask a lawyer, what's the purpose of being a lawyer? They're going to tell you to seek justice. Now, at least that's what they teach in the business schools or in the law schools. And again, lawyers have to make money, but that's not their purpose. Ask a professor, a teacher, what's the purpose of being a professor? To educate minds and hearts. Professor has to make money. Of course, we know not nearly enough, but it's a profession which has a wider goal than simply making money. It's trying to make the world a better place with its own code of ethics and set of goals and professional ideals.
Great. Are there any other things you'd like to do? Any other issues or points of view or perspectives you'd like to share with us? Okay. You've done a lot. I'm not criticizing you. It's a great interview. Think of anything else.
Let me.
For our field, for the topic.
One of the things that concerns me in the field of business ethics, as I look around in business schools throughout the United States and to some extent throughout the world, is that business schools are so focused on the ratings, trying to get rated highly. And how do they form those ratings? Well, they look at the salaries of graduates. And I think to be consistent in teaching students that the purpose of business is to create sustainable value for stakeholders, we ought to downplay the salaries, because some of our best students want to do work that doesn't maybe earn a great salary, but it makes the world a better place. NGO work, some of the startup businesses. And so I'm somewhat disillusioned sometimes with business schools who are so focused on ratings that they're downplaying their ethics departments or their people who are teaching business ethics. And I think we need to inspire business schools to take this broader picture and focus on business ethics, and certainly not downplay it. But as we know, there are schools who are downplaying it. And even in my old school, it's been a challenge to keep that flying the flag of ethics for 40 years. And I think we're going to continue to work at that.
Can I ask you a follow-up question about that, Father, in terms of one about intercollegiality with the business school and other disciplines within the school, the College of Knowledge, but also in the field, which of your colleagues, past or present, have either A, made singular brilliant contributions to the field of business ethics, or have impacted on your work?
Well, I think Pat Werhane has done some wonderful work, which has influenced my own thinking on a number of areas. And she, of course, taught in Loyola in Chicago, and then Virginia, the University of Virginia, the Darden School. And her work has been widely published. And I think it's been very helpful in my own development.
Which part of
Jerry? How about Jerry?
Then another very influential person in my educational development has been Jerry Kavanaugh, who's a Jesuit who teaches in Detroit Mercy in the field of business ethics. And I think he has been very good at reaching all levels of students. His point being that it's not just the best and the brightest, but it's every student in business who has to understand there is a normative dimension to what we're trying to do. And I think many people in business schools forget about normative dimension. That is, there's a right or wrong to some of the policies. And when you take wrong-headed policies, they can be very harmful to people in society. And I think Jerry Kavanaugh has helped me understand that right from the beginning. Very good.
Is teaching business ethics very singularly different? I mean, and so what would be different about it?
Different from what?
Well,
From
I'm
other
leaving that one open. I'm just saying, how do you find teaching it, or what is it anything different for you?
I think teaching business ethics is a little different from teaching marketing or accountancy or finance, because we're trying to educate not only the head but the heart. And I think in order to get our students very conscious of the harm that might be done, it's good for them to get out and see the least advantaged and how business is impacting on their lives. Now, we don't have the chance to take them out that often. Some of our schools, including my own, have opportunities for them to travel to poor areas in China or Latin America. But we try to use a lot of videos, which educates everybody, which shows how the poor are faring in the least developed countries, and how sometimes business is part of the problem. And I think we're trying to appeal not only to the intellectual dimension, but the affective, the feeling dimension. And I think that's different from the other major disciplines in the business school.
And any thoughts on the Society of Business Ethics?
Well, like every group of professions, I think you need a good professional society. And when I first was asked to teach business ethics 40 years ago, my friends said, you must get into the Society of Business Ethics and the Academy of Management, the Social Issues Division. because there's like-minded faculty who are very interested in this area and can bring you along. And I must say, I've learned a lot at these meetings. You go to the meetings annually, and you hear what your colleagues are teaching, what they're researching, what they found that works, what they found that didn't work. So I think professional associations like the Society of Business Ethics and like the Social Issues Division of the Academy of Management are crucial. And of course, I was the chairman of the Social Issues Division of the Academy of Management for a year and program officer. And so I know all the challenges of trying to run a professional organization, but most worthwhile.
That was good. I want to see anything else. You've done so well. You answered all our questions, but just any other comments, because this is on paper.
Of course, I could talk all day, as you may know, but one of the points I think that's crucial in teaching ethics today and teaching business students today is to help them understand that there is a normative dimension to all of our policies and programs. It's not enough to say what do consumers think about this policy. And sometimes consumers are right on and they understand the normative dimension, but many times they do not. And what we need is leaders, business leaders particularly, who understand the normative dimension and can say, I know this is wrong and this is going to be deleterious for the poor especially. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make this product because it could be harmful down the road to birds because of environmental problems. And so I think the normative dimension is crucial. I think it's very easy to forget about it. In my own institution, the University of Notre Dame, it's in our DNA. We were founded as a religious school, and the notion of right or wrong and business being used to advance the society is crucial and part of our DNA, but it's not in many schools. And even at Notre Dame, it's a challenge to keep that normative dimension alive.
And you think that's the role of the business ethicist, the normative element?
Yes.
Not a distinctive role, there are lots of roles.
Yeah, I think the distinctive role of the teacher of business ethics is to take the normative dimension and highlight it and help our students understand it through discussion of cases, through discussion of ethical theory. And I think this is a very important dimension, and I think some of our colleagues are doing this very well around the world.
And there's never a struggle between the engineer and the other parts of your faith.
Expand that a little.
I'm just sorry. You've had a very interesting career. You started off as a chemical
Yeah.
in the Navy. You were always a priest. You're a teacher. Are they all happily working together? Are there any internal struggles sometimes you have with worldview?
Well, I'm often asked, how does my chemical engineering undergraduate degree help me as a teacher in business ethics? And my simple answer is, it helps me think straight.
Yeah.
Chemical engineering is highly disciplined. The most difficult courses I took in my whole life were in chemical engineering, and including my PhD, my postdoctoral work at Stanford, because it's very rigorous thinking. And I think that has helped me in ethics, because it's easy to let the heart overcome the head. And what you want to do is to keep them both together, the head and the heart. And that's what I think chemical engineering has helped me do.